Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately named IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. And as part of our efforts to promote play, we're happy to introduce our Porch Play Chats. These are conversations with experts from a variety of topics, and these experts are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find the latest Porch Play Chats and learn more about IPA USA by visiting our website at ipausa.org. And if you click on that upper right-hand corner, you can connect to our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and our YouTube channel where all the Porch Play Chats are stored. Each week, we introduce a new Porch Play Chat. So every Monday, if you want to stay on, you can like our YouTube channel or like our Facebook page, and you'll be notified when a new Porch Play Chat is released on Mondays. So I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy. Hey, Lisa.
Hello.
Lisa is a board member as well as an advocate for play, as all of you know. And with us today is Janella Watson. Hi, Janella.
Nice to meet you.
So Janella has this amazing background. So she's a children's media, edtech, and museum consultant with expertise in creativity, play, and experiential learning. So right up our alley. And drawing on more than 20 years of work, so you don't look like you've been in this field for 20 years, Janella, just so you know.
Well, you'll keep
Uh,
you youthful, Deb.
as a researcher and a practitioner in children's museums and science centers, she creates this she creates experiences in these exhibits that really center around equity and spark joy and engage families in the whole play experience. Her current clients and partners include Nickelodeon, Brown University's Causality and Mind Lab, which I want to hear more about, Nucleus Education, Sesame Workshop, and MathTalk. And she currently lives in Providence, Rhode Island. I've been there with her husband and her curious and kind 7-year-old. And so today, Janelle's going to talk to us about the wonder and joy of mess making, the most amazing topic ever. So, Janella, can you help us understand where your passion for mess making and sensory rich play come from?
Happily. Well, thank you both so much for extending this invitation to chat with you and our playmates around the country and around the world. It's really a joy to join you.
Thank you. Thanks for saying yes.
And so
Peeps.
I'm telling you, I definitely feel in community immediately. It's a joy. So my roots in mess making go all the way back to the beginning. Certainly, my seeds were planted in my professional life along the way, but it actually starts from the very beginning for me with my parents and my grandparents. So, in particular, my mom's parents, Peter and Helen Klonchuk. Peter was a world-renowned chemist, someone who really had zeal for exploring the world and understanding how it worked up close, and sharing that wonder not only with his grandchildren, but with his students and with his clients and projects that he worked on around the world. His wife, my grandma Helen, was a special educator, and so my grandpa really taught me to look closely, to notice, and to wonder, especially in nature. My favorite mess making materials. And my grandmother really instilled in me a sense that we should extend access and invitation to every child to these rich experiences that are just beyond what we can see. So how do we extend those invitations to think with our hands, to really like get the silt and sludge between our fingers and find out not only what the world around us is made of, and what the possibilities in that wider world are as we explore, but also to find the possibilities within ourselves as we explore, right? To stretch our own perspective on the glorious role we can play in the world around us. So I thank my grandparents, right, for this steady invitation to look close and to notice and to share that, to help everyone, from the museum families that I've served to the audiences that I'm working with in children's media, to find that hook in, to find, the kind of wonder-filled and joyful spots, especially. I keep moving my hands just below screen, but everything that I'm saying is really about like taking in the wider world with all of our senses. And as I grew, I learned that that's actually how our brain forms connections and grows, right? It's through these sensory-rich opportunities to explore the world around us, and each connection we make to understanding and unpacking that our neural synapses happen. Those connections are made. Those fibers are laid down in our brain's architecture, and the more experiences that we're able to open ourselves up to, the richer those those inputs. Actually, the more fibers that get laid down, cementing those neural connections. So when I say that, like, I have passion for mess making, maybe, every now and again I call myself a professional mess maker. It's really like tapping into the goodness, the power of these sensory-rich exposures and experiences that build our brains, help us build connections, not only with the world around us, but with each other, that I really have been energized by, and taking those signatures of sensory-rich play to each kind of community and partner that I've crossed paths with over my career. Really, it keeps the joy at the very tippy top and the surface,
Dare you say at the fingertips, at your
right?
fingertips?
At your fingertips. There's no doubt, Lisa.
So Janella, I have a question, because lots of times what I find in early care and education programs, or even in the museum settings, though I will say Philadelphia has an amazing children's museum. It's an amazing one. That teachers are afraid of the mess, because they're afraid people will think they're in this chaotic, uncontrolled sort of space. And then I have a second thing that I want to sort of go to. How do we encourage them to go outside? It's 20 minutes on the playground. I tell them they must be out there for an hour, AM and PM. But what if there's nothing on the playground that's sensory rich? So I have all these questions about how we engage them we know the importance, but how do teachers practically apply that importance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh boy, Deb, there's so much in what you just asked. So I'll dive right in. I'll tell you a little bit about my my professional path, that might illuminate a little bit of how I've responded to those natural aversions that so many of us have, to the mess and to mess making. So I started out as a little kid with sensory aversions, especially tactile aversions, myself. Velvet made me cringe, and chalk under my fingernails was the worst, right? And so many of us grow up with sensory aversions. It's part of every early childhood classroom experience. I've witnessed it in my kiddo, who is a sensory sensitive kid. And when working at the New York Hall of Science, in the makerspace there, tinkering, designing, and making for kids 18 months through 8 years old and their parents, I saw so many hesitations, not only from parents, but from kids to dive into the mess. One example that comes up really keenly for me is a project I did for World Maker Faire when I was at the New York Hall of Science. I dubbed it Little Mud Makers. And it was essentially a tent that celebrated and glorified and elevated mud to its highest potential. So I thought very quickly as I was planning this, by the way, that I was either going to be the hero of Maker Faire or I was going to lose my job. And I didn't know which one of those outcomes had the edge, right? So we set out bins of mud with scientific equipment, with kitchen utensils. We had, lots of beakers and balances, but also, slotted spoons and all the rest that you would want for good mud exploration. We had some, mud painting, some like finger painting on huge canvas. And then we had a station with little mud bricks made of, hay and clay. And, as we were preparing for this event, we made several thousand mud bricks. My team was making them every day, and then I'd bring them home and bake them in my oven to dry them. The life of an educator is glorious. My husband really loved that one. And we set a stage with cleanup stations visible to everyone, right? Sinks with the right kind of drainage, nice little pump sinks, aprons if families wanted them, gloves if kids needed them, right? Setting the stage for an invitation that met folks where they were, and invited different levels of not only kind of play and activity, but also different layers of permission, right? Like to dig in and to dive in. So during, World Maker Faire comes, several thousand kids and families interact with mud over the course of the weekend. I stood back and I noticed. There's a lot of joy, a lot of squealing, a lot of slipping, a lot of mess making. But there was also some parents who shielded their kids' eyes, did not want them to see this corner of the fair, right? Didn't want the mess on their clothes, didn't want, to mess up the shoes, didn't want to. And then there was this one glorious mom who invited her kids to cake mud up her arms and back down the other side. This mom was a mud zombie. And she turned to me and said, "You pay hundreds of dollars for this in Manhattan." And, we all cackled, but understood so, with such fascination, all of the kind of layers and levels of permission, of invitation that were inherent in that experience. And so, back to your question about teachers and parents and the mess. I think that building strategy to manage the mess is always, will always be kind of overshadowed by the glory and the good that it is to invite the mess, right? And in part, it's not necessarily only those who are afraid of actually having to lift the cleanup, right? And my hint is always, how do you engage in creating a space where the expectation is set that everyone has responsibility for the cleanup, right?
Mhm.
That we all engage in the mess making, and then we all have, have responsibility to clean it up. But also, developing a set of strategies for managing the mess. So I always love to work bin-based. I often have a plastic tarp that I can put down below, sensory bins. A designated cleanup station, right? Which we often have within our early childhood classrooms anyway. And that shared responsibility for managing the mess as it comes. But that's just baked in to the experience. And my museum colleagues will tell you that I'm also very practiced at baking that into the makerspace experience or the exhibit experience, right? It's our shared responsibility to manage the messes that we make. And it's one of the most beautiful things to teach from, the youngest age, I think. Demonstrating to a child that they have permission to explore and express their creativity in the wildest possible ways. And then what the trickle out of ownership and responsibility to reining that back in actually looks like.
Well, and I think you've already given teachers strategies, right? You plan for the mess.
Yeah.
And you plan for the cleanup instead of, I'll never forget. So I was the director of an accredited early care and education program in Colorado, and the vice president of this large corporation sent her children to my program, which I was very happy about because we had a good program. But I remember a teacher, and so this goes back to what Rixa was talking about earlier today with giving teachers the opportunity to make a mistake. And so I had a wonderful teacher who was extremely play-based. And it was the afternoon after nap and cleanup, and I think it was snowing outside, so they weren't going to go out for a while. And she put flour in the sensory table. And so, as a director, you wander around the building quite often to check in with teachers. And I walked in and she had flour from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. And she was just like, oh my God, what have I done? Right? Because she hadn't planned she thought this will be a wonderful experience. And she had sifters in there and kids were having a ball. They were covered from head to toe with flour. And I looked at her and I said, do you need help? She said, please. And so, and of course, the vice president's son was in that room. And so I quickly got all the children over to circle and did, little bunny foo-foo, which gets them all there immediately. And I was seeing as she's like crazy trying to clean up flour over half of the room, and children were falling because it was slippery,
So slippery,
right?
yeah.
Oh my God. And, and the vice president was due to pick up in 45 minutes, right? And so she is just flipping out. But it was interesting. I said, so how can we do that?
Yeah.
In a more maybe not in the sensory table with 5 children around it, but how can you provide that experience? And do we do this outside instead of inside?
Outside, absolutely. That's my first thought, Deb.
Yeah.
Take it outside. And it brings to mind so importantly a circle back to one of the questions that you asked earlier, right? So at NISI, in my experiments with making and tinkering with young kids, I knew that if I was going to do this right, it would be some of the messiest stuff the museum had seen, right? Truly, if we're doing our jobs, there's going to be some chaos in the beauty and some beauty in the chaos. And I started my apology campaign with the facilities staff, with the visitor services staff, very early, right? In the earliest stages. It was in building relationship and rapport with those who were going to help me make these messes manageable. that I knew I needed to do. And so I took an interesting tack. In establishing the pilot for this program and kind of testing what it could be, I sent an invitation for every prototyping session to everyone in the museum. I invited the custodial staff and the maintenance staff and the marketers and the development team, and folks started to pop in. We placed it strategically at a quiet hour in the afternoon so they could leave their desks and they could, or leave the museum floor and step in. We also, so that really was about helping them have a window in to how rich and how necessary these experiences were going to be, right? They would have the embodied experience themselves. They would have had that moment of thinking with their own hands when they were diving into the oobleck or the, the block printing or the, anything having to do with glitter. I got in so much trouble, right?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
But and oobleck was a big one, right? So how do you experiment with building those connections with all of the stakeholders who need to buy in to the necessity of the mess making for the learning that's going to happen, right? And so I couldn't get everyone to leave their desk. I knew it wasn't going to happen. I knew that some of our researchers, wouldn't be able to make it down to see what was happening. So I enlisted a colleague to come and photograph each of these workshops. And we did a simple consent, and I shared those photographs each Monday morning after a weekend of programs with a little story, just a little snippet of what that family was doing, what they were experiencing, what the kid said as they were exploring, what that facial expression of frustration that she was displaying might mean. And by extending that invitation, right, into the deeper story that's the undercurrent behind the mess, right? Plus, they were adorable kids, and and these emails were then being forwarded to the board members because look at these adorable kids covered in paint or whatever, whatever it was. It also helped us build a set of case studies that could be shared with funders, that could be shared with, with principals and administrators who were not so sure about the value of the mess, or help them build kind of a keener lens to look through the mess with the teachers or with the museum educators or with the parents.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about my family childcare experience, my center-based experience, and how, if you really wanted the parental buy-in, right? First, we're not making a mess just for the sake of making a mess, right? But if your kid is going home with paint on their face, it's like an organic byproduct of the rich, relevant, meaningful opportunities that, let's be real, you don't want to do at home. So we're doing them here. And we found that when we flipped back to school night and orientation, instead of it being the laundry list of, everything in the contract and the policies, and we have the adults start playing, the buy-in to the play-based lens of the program increased off the chart. And exactly what you said, Janella, that they had not been they had forgotten, let's be honest, right? The adults had forgotten, one, how fun it can be, how engaging, how freeing it can be. And so in that moment, that memory gets like sparked again. And then they do bring a deeper level of understanding when they pick up in the middle of the day, right? And oh my gosh, I walked in during this big exploration time, and everybody benefited from everybody having that opportunity to get their hands back in it again, and understanding that they're not just painting, but you know, you get those little windows of opportunity when the other, I like to say the other is ready to receive, you know, and while they're painting, their spatial and hand-eye coordination and fine motor development, that there is some rationale, it is enjoyable.
Pattern finding and pattern making, all of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and Lisa, you helped me realize that in this conversation, I've been burying the lead a little bit. So years ago, in between museum, my museum stops, I started my career at Cole Children's Museum of Greater Chicago, and I was there for 8.5 years, almost in as many roles, with as many hats to wear as I spent years. And that's really where I started to like just be in community with educators, with early childhood educators. I was a grants coordinator and helping bring project-based learning to Chicago public school preschool teachers, right? And so studying under and working with Judy Harris-Helm and Lillian Katz, really the godmothers of the project approach. And I feel so grateful for that kind of foundation laid, right? Very rich in Reggio, so deep in you know, in Montessori perspectives, but also whole child. You know, when we think about you know, you were saying a little bit earlier, Lisa, in our our pre-chat banter that truly, you know, maker spaces are rooted in the best practices of early childhood theory that stretches back, you know, from the beginning, right? If we really want to shake it down. And so, you know, all of those aspects of materials literacy, of, you know, of sensory rich exploration are really like, yeah, my heart has been there. The lead that I was burying is that I moved from Cole Children's Museum to run a pop-up sponsored by Bounty Paper Towels called Make a Masterpiece.
Nice.
So Make a Mess in just outside of Chicago was a creative art studio, kind of unlock and unleash.
I went there.
No way, Lisa.
I walked in there one time because I was like, what's going on here? And whoever was at the desk gave me a one-on-one tour of what y'all were doing there.
I can't believe you were in my spot. Absolutely. So, you know, essentially it was a, you know, a guerrilla marketing strategy, you know, create this space where kids can unlock and unleash their creativity, make a big mess, and in swoops Bounty to clean it all up, right? So it's about building customer loyalty to your brand.
And Bounty, just FYI, is my favorite paper towel. My mom only used Bounty paper towels.
And trust you guys, if you ever need a use for a paper towel core in the industry, they call it a dirter. Just give me a ring. Okay. I've got them. I've got them. So, Make a Masterpiece was something living on the edge, right? We had really stripped back all of those kind of limitations to diving into the mess, and then we cleaned it up, you know, as it was in that space. Not exactly the model of a children's museum or a community library or an early childhood classroom, but in talking with a colleague who, a new colleague who also visited Make a Masterpiece, Lisa, with his family years ago. I mean, we're talking a decade ago now, right? He described to me this week how his family felt when they entered that space. So from huge bubble machines that spit out liquid watercolored bubbles to a nature, you know, and an exploration area where there was a new project each week, to a live kitchen where kids were shoving things into ovens, in kitchen chemistry experiments themselves, to everyone's favorite drum roll. We put the kids in rain gear from head to toe, and they went into a plexiglass sound booth with drums filled with paint, and splashed around. A plumbing nightmare, I'll tell you, but the most glorious sensory experiences truly that there are. And so from there, this colleague described that it was the first place his family had been where they felt invited wholly as themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That they did not have to pretend to be anyone else. They did not have to put on airs. They didn't have to, they truly, like, where their whole being was invited into the space. And so, I may have shed a tear, when you know deeply what the intentions of creating space for that kind of feeling and exploration really, like, strike a family where they live when they really feel it, that you've done some good. So, certainly I talked about where my messmaking began, but that's truly where it was cemented.
Well, and I love that your family culture opened the door, that it was it was something that was in your lived experience with your grandparents, and that there was richness and acceptance and intention in that. And I think that I have students in my classroom, and I teach in a community college, and we do lots of hands-on experiences. And I have to have gloves in the cupboard, and I have tongs for them, because there are sensory adverse students who
Absolutely.
say, I can't touch that. And I said, so w- would you like tongs? Would you like gloves? Would you like, what would
What
you like?
tool, what tool, right?
Yes. What can I do to support you?
Yeah,
And sometimes they say, I just want to watch. And I'm like, that's absolutely fine. And then I think about how I can model for them ways to help other children who might be sensory averse to either sit and watch or to have a tool,
yeah.
because I worry, because they have their sensory aversion, that they won't do sensory stuff.
Deb, you are speaking to my heart right here. So, one of the most kind of formative experiences I've had, certainly, is working on. Hello there again.
Yes, so nice to have you. One thing that we talked about when you were on pause is that we also want to get back. We know we're running it over time, but we also want to get back to the importance of how you embraced and invited and were respectful of the museum staff, and then how you documented what you were doing to engage others in the work. So that has to be like our closing little piece. So go ahead.
Fair enough. That sounds good to me. You got it. So, um, so as I mentioned, those seeds and those ideas of experimenting with how to tell this story and how to engage all of the various stakeholders, right? The families at the core, the staff to support them in their exploration in those experiences, and then the concentric circles outward of stakeholders, out to, to the teachers that we were going to partner with in the broader community, right? How do we bring everyone on board? And so I really I have continued to build on that idea of capturing the story through photographs, through video, through creating zines or comics of experiences, storyboarding experiences, to really highlight what is happening in the midst of, of those kinds of sensory rich explorations. And also putting the tools in the hands of families to document their processes and their experiences, or putting the tools in the hands of your students in the classroom to use the, to use those opportunities to really, to extend the documentation, not only to the, the capacity of a staff to capture what's happening in the midst of it, but to actually build that into the fabric of the experience that you're creating, right? So not only did we have these sensory rich stations, bubble filled tables or oobleck on speakers, but we also had a design station and a documentation station, right? So an opportunity for kids to, after they shook up batches of ice cream, right, using ice and rock salt, actually mural about what they created, right? Or draw a sketch of what you're going to create, and then start to attach some labels or some little pictorial labels to what you've designed, right? How do we extend the opportunities for kids to actually actively engage themselves in documenting what they are creating? How do we create those low stakes, low hanging bar opportunities, right, to invite them in? And honestly, it is the biggest key to how to get a kid to let go of the material thing that they have created and been playing with and is now a ball of muck, right, by the end of their exploration. It's by encouraging them to snap a photograph of it, right? It's by inviting them to unpack what they created and think, pair, share with a friend to talk about their process, right? It's in all of those ways that they actually can step away from, the thing that they've duct taped together or pieced together with pipe cleaners, and really take away from themselves the story and the learning that happened.
I want to jump in because that is so, and I would imagine at a museum, the need to kind of release, because you're not going to be able to bring it with you, but that's some good strategy for me to share moving on, because that's often a question with in childcare centers is somebody wants to leave it up. We want to leave it up.
Curation of those materials of what we create is one of the toughest tightropes truly to walk, right? You want to inspire the next creation.
And a perfect use of technology,
yes.
right? This is what technology should be used for, not some of the things we're currently using it for, right? So,
and Deb, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, my work now is at both ends of that spectrum, right? So I'm working with gaming companies and edtech companies on digital solutions to help us stay connected with each other and embracing the whole learning landscape, right? But how do we frame these all as tools at our disposal, as opposed to distractions or subtractions, right, from the things that we need to learn? So I often frame my thoughts around technology as whatever I create, whatever I bring to my students, my child, my family, I want it to be as generative as possible. I want whatever technology my kiddo is taking in to help him thrive as a creator and not just as a consumer.
yes, thank you.
So that for me is a really important kind of switch in terms of our frame of thinking, especially those within early childhood who feel most resistant, right, to the crush or the wave of screen time that we're all leaning into during this moment.
Yes, exactly. So, Janelle, I can't believe it, but we're way over time. But I do want to, I'm going to do a closing, so don't go anywhere. Don't leave when I say we're done.
Absolutely. And thanks you guys for not minding the rustle behind us. Like, our lives are so messy. It's a joy to be with you from home and kind of in the real of.
Yeah. In the real, though, mine is a virtual background, so I wish I had this porch
Oh.
outside. So for more information on other porch play chats or to join IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, thanks for listening and keep on playing.
What a joy